Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
At the end of the day, it's important to appreciate the genuine artistry that goes into telling stories on the screen, no matter how large or short they may be. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals, and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do, because, well, you're here. Please subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Give us a like. Give us the old 5-star rating on your podcast platform of choice. We're pretty much everywhere, like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google. We're pretty well covered across the board, and plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would absolutely appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we're on Instagram, and we're on TikTok, and we're on Letterboxd for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because, if we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it even more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please, do us the kindness and pay us a visit. On this episode, we got a fun one. We got a real interesting one. It is a short film that has been longlisted for the Academy Award this year in the highly competitive live-action short film section. This film is called Little Jewel, and it is from a second-generation filmmaker. Her name is Catherine Corman, and she is the daughter of the legend himself, Mr. Roger Corman. And Little Jewel is it's very enigmatic. It's enigmatic. It's got a real lyrical sense to it, and it's shot on the streets and sort of the borrowed rooms of a downtown LA that looks almost otherworldly, and it's adapted from the work of Nobel Laureate Patrick Modiano, and it's from a novel set in the mid-century Paris, and it's transposed into LA, but it still keeps a very much a timeless and poetic quality to it, which echoes like a post-war left bank, which is what the original material was inspired by. And Little Jewel it's a gorgeous little film, which was actually shot on Super 8, and to be able to see something like this shot on Super 8, at 18 frames per second with a real sense of mysticism to it in a lo-fi setting almost is a beautiful thing to watch. And we had the unique pleasure of sitting down with Catherine Corman just to talk about the inspiration for the film, and also the elephant of the room being the daughter of a legend like this and making her own films, and just the power of storytelling and the power of embracing the art form of trying new things and putting it out there into the universe for people to consume and talk about, which is really, at the end of the day, what art is supposed to be about. And I think it's a beautiful thing. So, like I said, if you are a film person at all and you enjoy short films and Little Jewel comes across your desk, I do recommend you check it out. But first, enjoy our talk with the one and only Catherine Corman, because between you and me, it's a pretty good one. All right. Well, obviously, Catherine, first off, thank you so much for the time today. I really appreciate this.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Now, congratulations on Little Jewel. Man, I thought it was gorgeous. I guess my first question is, walk me through the origin of this on your end, like wanting to tell the story.
So the origin is actually the pandemic. My sister and I went home to Los Angeles to be with our parents, and we just took out the list, the Cahiers du Cinema, the BFI, AFI list of the 100 greatest films. And we went through it with my father and had him choose like his master list out of that list. And that was our pandemic, is that we just watched a different film every night. And it was really just to sort of like pass the time and not, feel the dread of the pandemic, but it ended up being this really beautiful experience. And I just started, out of that, thinking of doing something myself. And this was just, as you can tell, very bare bones. It was shot on Super 8. It was just with my family and a couple of friends. So that was sort of the genesis of it.
Well, I mean, I love the aesthetic of the Super 8 though, because I mean, honestly, I mean, obviously, this is like you could have faked it in digital if you'd wanted to, but it definitely gave it a softer tone. Like, how important was it for you to sort of be running around with something tactile as opposed to, you know, like your phone even?
Right. Well, it's actually very, very important to me. So thank you for asking that. I really love, my first book was on the surrealist sculptor Joseph Cornell, and he was really involved with Jonas Mekas in the early days of anthology film archives. And that world was so intriguing to me, and I really felt at home there. And a lot of those people, like Stan Brakish and Jonas, were shooting on Super 8, and in this way that's sort of like casual, and yet their whole lives were devoted to it. You know, it's like you can spend like 30 years writing poetry and then you casually make a diary film of your day in Super 8 and it comes out like a poem. Like I'm talking about Jonas right now. So that's really the origin of my love for Super 8, why I feel so comfortable in that medium, and why I think it's really valuable just as an art form, because there's like a looseness to it. You don't have to take yourself too seriously. You don't have to act like you're making a real film. It's more just like you can explore something or express something. And if it doesn't work out, it's Super 8. You know what I mean? You didn't waste people's time and money. It was just a small project, a casual thing, but that has the opportunity to sort of reach for the sublime, I would say.
Would you say that sort of speaks to your background and history as a photographer? Because I mean, especially when any photographers that I've known and talked to in my life, like, I mean, as much as digital is a helpful tool, they definitely want to go more hands-on and more tactile with more with genuine film as opposed to shooting digitally. Do you think for you as an artist that kind of defines your experience? Like, because you're not going to get the warmth with digital. You know what I mean?
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. And actually, when I was studying photography, we did actual physical analog darkroom. And it just you know what? I use Photoshop. I use digital, processes.
Right.
But I have to say that like when you're actually in the dark room and just all the time that's invested in getting that print, and just something about those, the haptic poetry, as it were, the kind of like poetry of touch of making the image. So much more goes into it, in my opinion. A lot of people hate analog, they love digital. But for me personally, when you've invested so much time in like an alteration of just a half stop of light in an
Right.
image, you're so much more deliberate about what exactly it is you're doing. Whereas I feel like you have so much freedom in digital that sometimes you can just try it a million ways and see which one you like best. And I think both are valuable ways of working, but analog to me has a lot of the magic, I would have to say.
No, I agree with you. I mean, it creates a genuine sense of I mean, like I said, warmth and honesty, and it really allows you to sort of make something that is not just transformative, but it allows the viewer to be transported at the same time.
Yes, and I think so much of our history with film, and especially super low tech film, it makes you connect with it in a much more personal way. Like a lot of people have family home movies, that like parents or
Right.
grandparents shot on Super 8 or something like that. And I actually have a friend who's an artist in New York. He's from Italy, and he goes to like flea markets all over Italy and finds footage of families' home movies of vacations and that sort of thing. And like that's the material for his art. He makes collage films out of that. And there's something about watching like someone else's home movies. You kind of feel like you were there. You kind of feel like you understand that family in a way, because you're so used to like it feels to me not as much as a performative or self-conscious mode of filmmaking. Just someone in the family had a camera and they picked it up while the kids were at the beach or something. So there's like an honesty and immediacy to it that you get to take it for free. You know what I mean? It's right there in the medium for you. You don't have to lift a finger. The whole history of it already exists for you to use.
No, I mean, I'm curious, and I mean, this is the loaded question that I have to ask because I mean, obviously, your family name carries a bit of weight when it comes to making film, and I mean, and while you've obviously carved your own name in terms of your photography work, was there any sort of hesitancy to actually pick up a camera and make even a short film?
No, because it took me forever to actually do that. It was like a really long time of working in photography, so that by the time I came to do this, it didn't feel like such a make or break thing. It felt more like an organic little project we were doing kind of as a family. My father and my sister are in the film. And there wasn't really any pressure because if it didn't work out, no one ever had to see it. I didn't have a budget. I didn't have people financing the film. I didn't have professional actors. So the stakes were really low, which just gave me like an incredible amount of freedom. I remember there was this essay that by Moby when he first moved to LA, and he was saying that in New York, people are allergic to failure. It's like if you fail, no one wants to be around you because it might be contagious and they might fail too.
Right.
But in Los Angeles, it's just a totally different feeling. And in his words, it was like 1 week you're sleeping on a friend's couch and the next week you're Katy Perry, and it's like, and then maybe you lose it all and then maybe someone rediscovers you and you come back, and there's sort of not this sense of like you have to succeed or you have to be the best or else you're a failure in LA, which is like I've been living in New York forever, and it was in LA that I started thinking about making this film and made it. People talk about Hollywood or the industry as if it's some oppressive thing, but in reality there is that sense that like you can be up and down, you can fail and you can come back. There's not the same weight that I guess I'd been feeling in New York.
No, that makes a lot of sense too, because I mean, I can imagine especially keeping it sort of intimate and small and using it as more of as a piece of art than maybe sort of say developing and mounting a feature, which I mean you've never done, but I mean you've had a front row seat for it, I'm sure, just being around the family dinner table is a different thing.
Yeah. I also I really love anthology film archives in New York and some of the galleries that are connected with that. And I had been doing some, like in conjunction with the photography, like some really small Super 8 projects, but they didn't have actors. They were just more sort of experimental visual pieces that I would say are more akin to photography.
Right.
So that's the mode that I've been doing that for years and years. And like I did a silent film of Alice in Wonderland shot at Oxford, which is where Lewis Carroll lived when he wrote Alice in Wonderland. And it was like an actual silent film where there's text from the book that are inner titles as you would have in silent film. And the rest of the film is just like what Lewis Carroll might have seen as he'd gone for a daily walk on the long walk at Christ Church College while he was coming up with his idea for the story. And when he got back to college, the real Alice Little would be there and he would have the story to tell her. So it's what I've done with this film is like sort of in between really making a movie and doing the kind of photography and then a little bit of motion photography that I'd been doing for years. So it was a really safe, comfortable, easy way for me to do this.
Well, and I mean, it feels like just the way, not just the business, but I mean, just sort of the accessibility to photography equipment and camera equipment. It's allowing establishments like, maybe Cannes or Venice to sort of, highlight something you've done, but at the same time, so can MoMA, so can, museums around the world. The line feels like it's blurring a little bit. Like it's not just photography or it's not just art. It can be a bit of both.
Yeah, I absolutely think that. And I know a lot of people who used to say like, oh, it's so avant-garde to blur genres. And I think that's not, I mean, look, a lot of people would say for the whole 20th century that wasn't the case, but I definitely agree a lot with what you're saying. And one thing that came to mind when you said that is the line between fiction and nonfiction.
Yeah.
And you think of like Sarah Polley's work, and there's a huge truth element to it, and it's fiction in a number of things she's done. And I think that sort of you're allowed to, in a lot of ways in this day and age, you're allowed to live between categories that seemed unshakable, that seemed to form the building blocks of the world, and our understanding of the world is the way we knew it. And those are sort of not as necessary anymore, not as clear anymore. And I think it just opens up a lot of freedom.
No, I agree with you 100%. And I mean, as a Torontonian and a Canadian, like Sarah Polley is our sort of flag bearer who we love to death. I get to see the movie this week, so I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, she is amazing.
But I mean, I'm curious for you because it really feels like we're in a place where, like you said, the lines don't matter anymore, and artists can push themselves to pretty much anything they want to do because the resources are there. And for you, do you see yourself sort of staying in this lane that you've been, especially when it comes to filmmaking, or do you have other aspirations or other ideas for projects in the future?
Well, to me, they're not, just as kind of we've been saying, like they're not so genre specific. Like I don't see the dividing line as much in the mode of expression. Like I'm working on a sculpture right now that's based on the poetry of John Ashbery, and it takes the form of a memory theater, which was a Renaissance amphitheater they built in Venice that was meant to be a map of the human mind. That to me doesn't feel that different than this film, which is basically the exploration of the inside of this girl's mind, even though it takes the form of an external walk through the city. So yes, I have ideas for more films. I have ideas for more books. I have my ideas for more photography projects, but they all feel sort of braided together for me in a way.
For sure. Okay. Now, I mean, I'm curious because, I mean, obviously, like I said, your father is obviously the legend, Mr. Roger Corman, but as an artist, and him also as an artist in his own right, you're both very different. But I mean, I'm kind of curious, is there anything you learned from him sort of in the creative process, sort of as you were forming yourself as an artist?
Oh my God, every single thing I know. Yeah, yes. Everything I know. I mean, from day zero, our whole lives, I remember reading that there are three schools of thought about what drives the world. And some people think it's power, some people think it's art, and some people think it's religion, like historically throughout the centuries. And for us as a family, it was just art. That was it. When we traveled to see art. That was the most important legacy that the world had left, and the whole history of thousands of years of humanity had left us was the art that they created and was left behind. So it wasn't even just something like art is important or go to a museum. It was more just like, this is what humanity gave us. This is the kernel of truth that we have as a result of being alive as a species for thousands of years. And then within that, he really didn't, a lot of people in any field, their parents kind of want their kids to go into their,
Yeah, that's my next question. Yeah.
but no, for him, it was so open. It was just like anything you wanted to do, absolutely supportive. So it's a huge part of our life. Like as with most families, we like watch movies together, but it's just like with my dad, it's like afterwards, we actually, during the pandemic, my sister and I made watercolor posters of each movie we watched, and then we put them up on the wall, and we're publishing an edition of them with Lapis Press in Los Angeles.
Oh, that's awesome.
And oh, thank you. And then you can see they're on the BFI website. He did a lockdown diary and used those posters as illustrations. But on top of each poster, we have a piece of vellum that just has like what my father said about the film after we watched it. And it is just, almost unique in a way, because sometimes it would be really specific about, Hitchcock here was in medium close shots a lot, and that's really unusual for that kind of scene. Or in other times it would be, I remember the time I had lunch with Orson Welles and I wanted to cast him in this role and we were discussing it, and then other times it would be memories of the actor who'd been in the film and the times that they'd spent together in like the Bohemian 60s and that sort of thing. So it was like filmed from every single angle, from a critical angle, from an analytical angle, from a personal angle, from like memories of the significance of the film at the moment it came out, as opposed to like the significance of the film today. So I would say just a vast, deep education in like what film is, what film means, what the film community has been like over the past 50 years or so. And then, all of that really went into how I feel about film and why I think it's important to make film.
Well, and I mean, I think that really speaks to just sort of and I mean, this is something I think like we've lost a little bit, but it's one of those things where, somebody like Tarantino influenced so many different kind of people, and
Yeah.
they call it sort of the video store generation, but it kind of got diluted down to like, well, if I just watch Tarantino movies, then I'll understand the history of cinema. It's like, no, you won't. You got to do the work, and you've got to put the work in to sort of understand the legacy of the art form that you're contributing to. And I mean, I think your dad does that really well. And I mean, I think you've obviously learned that quite well and sort of applying it to your own field. And I mean, for you, like if someone asks you, like, how do I I don't want to say get into the business because that's a bit of a loaded term, but how do I figure out my voice as an artist? Like, what would you say to them?
Oh, it's so easy. And it goes back to what you just said. I really love Quentin. He's the one who presented my father with his Oscar.
Right.
So
Oh, for sure.
he's
No,
like a
he's
great
the best.
hero in our family. But I don't know if you've read his new book, Cinema
I'm
Speculation.
reading it right now.
Oh, it's amazing. I love it. And it just like the short form answer is just watch everything, just watch literally everything. And then over time, it'll become really clear to you what your lineage is and where you belong and what resonates with you. And like so many people say, oh, great artists steal and, one thing and another. And I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but there's a sense. I remember watching a lot of films that once I started being cognizant of people borrowing or being heavily influenced by, there was a sense in which I thought it was cheating. And then later I thought it was homage. But just thinking about cinema speculations, there was a really great essay on Citizen Kane that said the whole thing came down to that scene that's like the banquet scene
Yeah.
where he's just like eating and eating and eating and he can't stop. And I forget the exact line, but it's something like, why are you still eating or something like that? And he's like, I'm still hungry. And reading cinema speculations, like with everything Quentin's done, with all of his accolades and all of achievements, he
That,
still wants it. He still wants more. He still
that
wants to
guy's
see
still
more.
hungry. Yeah.
Exactly. It's that. And it's like that spirit. When you say, like, how do you break into the industry? I have no idea how you break into the industry. I haven't broken into the industry.
Right. No,
But
exactly.
as far as like how to make a film, there's this essay by Rilke where he says, like, it's Letters to a Young Poet, actually. And he says, if you feel like you would die if you couldn't be a poet, then you should be a poet. And otherwise you shouldn't. And I read it and I was like, oh, I could live my life so easily not being a poet. I could live my life going to museums all day for the rest of my life and be perfectly happy. I guess I shouldn't be a poet. But there's a lighter way of saying that, which is your deepest, deepest, deepest passion. And first of all, how can you fulfill that passion? But also, how can you find kinship in
Right.
that passion?
Yeah.
And that's like the cinema speculations thing. Like, it doesn't matter what your taste is. It doesn't matter if you only like French film or whatever it is. It's like that hunger that can sort of never be satiated, because like you'll always want more of what it is that's fulfilling to you and feels nourishing to you and feels like you found a home there. And I think for anyone who's like thinking about making films or, maybe wants to, you have the luxury. This isn't 1920, like we have the luxury of like 100 years of people trying to figure out what film is and how it works. And yeah, I would just say watch everything you can, and then your taste will start to form and your voice will become clear from that.
Well, I mean, I agree with that 100%. And I mean, just it's one of those things where I mean, especially in my job as a film critic, I mean, I do, I love to watch everything, but I mean, sometimes it's a chore as well. But seeing something like your short film here was that kind of nourishment for me. And I mean, I think it's a beautiful piece of work. And I mean, I know you've been long listed, but I certainly hope you get shortlisted for the big award as well. So, but I mean, and just again, congrats on the work and thank you so much for the time today.
Oh, thank you. That was so kind of you. And I also just wanted to say, as far as being a critic, a really close family friend of ours, I don't know if you knew Pierre Ricciant.
I met him once, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And he, to me, was sort of the ultimate of that passion. And again, talking about genres, it's like I've seen him talking with filmmakers, like some of our most revered filmmakers ever. And there didn't feel to me to be such a line between filmmaker and critic, even though to the world at large, you might think there was, but like their passion for film was exactly the same.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that's definitely a good thing to put out there in the universe too, because especially from the critic standpoint, like a lot of people just view us as angry cranks, but when you really get down to the meat of it, I mean, sure, there are a few angry cranks, don't get me wrong, but when you get down to the meat of it all, there is such a shared passion for cinema. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, again, Catherine, again, congratulations so much on the film, and thank you for the time today.
Oh, thank you so much.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.